Hello, dreamy people, and welcome to another exciting day in the Writer's Haven. This is Helena, back with another show you will not want to miss. Joining us today is Troy Suesse. Troy is the author of sci-fi dystopian novel Maximum Capacity. Raised in the suburbs of Annapolis, Maryland, I'm so excited that he's a native of the area. Troy has developed an appreciation for the planet and is inspired by science, nature, and outer space. He has generated a unique adventure that plays out in his book. This is your first book, his first book. So please join me in welcoming Troy Suesse. Thank you so much for being here, Troy.
It's all my pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Absolutely would not want it any other way because this book is hot. And I have so many questions about it. But first I want to ask you the basic question of what is it about? For our audience, I want you to just give us a quick author summary of your book.
So here you go. There's a couple underlying themes to Maximum Capacity. It actually started out as a space odyssey because really, if you think about it, things are finite on Earth, limited resources, and eventually overcrowding might cramp us a bit. So 1,000 years into the future is where we're set, to where the Earth is so overcrowded it cannot sustain a population growth. So we're going to be space traveling a little bit, hoping to find another Earth-like planet out there. And we find some interesting planets and interesting life forms out there along the way. But that's just a piece of what's going on in Maximum Capacity. The other piece is the dystopian piece, inspired by the Hunger Games movies from about 6 or 8 years ago. What's happening is if we can no longer sustain a population growth on Earth, what are we going to do? We're going to run out of resources. So how do we handle that? Well, for every baby born, another human must die. That's the conundrum we're in. So this is a sci-fi dystopian novel that plays out on Earth primarily, but we do some space traveling as well. Now these themes are intertwined, and it bounces back and forth from Earth to the space travel piece. Inspired by the Hunger Games, I tell you, because the way we figure out who has to go, Helena, is those with the highest violation counts, those who steal and pilfer and kill and things like that. Well, society finds that unacceptable in 1,000 years from now. And so what we do, we have to round them up every so often, and we put them in giant cages, and it's fight to the death before a live interactive audience, because folks whose family members they've killed and things like that can avenge them by influencing the killing devices within. That's how they check the population back. So unfortunate scenario there that we're heading towards 1,000 years from now. But the hope is that this universe is so vast and wondrous that there's another Earth-like planet floating around somewhere that's just like planet Earth. And if we can find it, well, maybe we can get there and expand the population there and survive into the future.
Awesome. Thank you for that summary. So we round up the bad people. How do we do that? Is it, are we hunting the bad people? The good people are hunting the bad people, or how is that?
So it turns out we're not free hunting. What we do, we have a society that's run by what I term the Venom Society. This is a ruling body 1,000 years into the future. They decide who gets resources. They also decide who gets to be inserted into the expulsion, is what I call that event that I described to you. So every so often, they'll go around and find folks with the highest violation counts. And they know who they are because they have databases that monitor that.
Okay.
And the reason they know is because when the babies are born, we put little chips in them. And one of the factors that plays out on their chip is their violation count. And so they can see at any point in time who has the highest counts and where they're located. And so they'll round those folks up. And that's when they bring them to the event.
And who is the they? Who's the controlling hierarchy in this world that is so amazing? And I want to talk a little bit about how you even conjured this in your brain, but answer that question for us.
So the concept of the fight to the death was inspired by the Hunger Games, but I didn't want to be the same as the Hunger Games. I wanted to be my own thing. So I've created this adventure that goes on Earth. But I needed a ruling body that was different than that. Now, when I wrote these characters in, I'm very vivid in the way I describe them, how they think, how they feel, what they wear, the garb, how their movements and things like that. And they're a very distinct and unusual set of characters. So the plot will play out and describe exactly why they appear unusual to you and I, and different. And we'll figure that out at the end of the story. But in the meantime, they are the ruling body, and you don't cross them, because they at any time could take you and pluck you and make you part of the big show.
You took these elements from different movies and screenplays, and you did not duplicate them, but you were inspired by them.
I was inspired by them and developed my own sort of reflections of those things in maximum capacity. But mind you, maximum capacity is a whole different ballgame than any of those.
Okay, so let's talk about your process for writing the book. How long did it take to write?
Well, that's a good question. I actually started writing that many years ago. But you see, I have a day job, and so writing for me had to come in my evenings and weekends. Well, that's okay and well, but when you have 3 children and you're very involved in their activities and, and their evening activities and their school activities and all this.
Put these things on the shelf for a second because life happens and you have to deal with it.
Because it was my first time through, my process was a little ad hoc, a little convoluted, and I found this out the hard way. Because when I figured I was getting close to a full manuscript that I could take and pitch and query to literary agents, I found that I still had a lot of work to do. And I found that out.
Did you take any writing classes?
I've taken some writing classes, you know, in college and things like that. But I always had a good command of the English language anyway, because I was studious in school and did my homework and did my extra credits and things.
Well, the reason why I ask is because it's very well written. It flows very well. It is captivating. It's a page turner. And this is your first book.
Yeah.
And so you don't have, I guess, what they would call formal training necessarily as a writer.
Correct.
Did you work in the field of science as your 9 to 5 to also kind of glean from that experience, or totally different?
So I work in a professional world, and I've had jobs over the years that require me to write some also, and to put out instruction and information to large audiences.
Technical writing, not creative writing.
More on the technical side, informational side. So I've gotten a lot of practice that way.
Yeah. Well, that's
but I was never a writer by trade. That wasn't my day job per se. But I always had that passion that I wanted to do that in my off time and publish.
Well, this is a very impressive first book.
No, thank you.
And a great start in your profession as a writer, a professional writer. And kudos to you for publishing, because, and I can't remember what the stats are, but it's pretty grim.
Yes.
Those who start and actually finish a book, the numbers, the percentages is very low. So you completed this wonderful novel, all, what, 267 pages of it. Tell me what, as you were in the process of writing the book, what were some of the challenges that you faced in writing it? Because I'm very fascinated about this world that you've created. It's not like, you know, your ordinary kind of thing that a person would write about and based on the reality as we know it as a day-to-day. I mean, you had to reach into areas to kind of pull this imaginative world, universe, together 1,000 years from now. So tell me how you were able to do that.
So for me, the ideas and information flow came pretty well. I had been thinking about doing this a long time. I had had a fascination for our space and Earth and things for a long time. So I had ideas brewing for a long time. What was a little more difficult for me was projecting a character set into that.
Okay. Character development.
Character development. And no novel is as great as it can be without likable characters that your audience can sort of associate with.
And the ones we like to hate.
True, true. So you want to try to get, and this was my first time through, so you want to try to get a flavor of both of those. You want to have the antagonist thing going on, you want to have the protagonist, somebody you can pull for. So that was one piece that I found that I had to sort of work heavy at, but I found also that the way I approached writing the book was haphazard. Over the years, and
Haphazard in what way?
In the sense that I'd come home from work one day and I would have an idea that I knew I wanted to data dump. I wanted to get it from here into here. So I sat.
So you don't do longhand, you type.
So I started out writing on pencil and paper.
Okay.
And then I found after I got about 30 pages into it, I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a lot of typing, so maybe I should just start doing that now. And I backstepped a little bit to type all that in, and then from there I would just sit at the Word document and kind of poke things in.
Okay, so you do it in Word, you don't use any of the other writing tools, which is great.
Yep.
Plenty of
I know
people
there's
do
some
it
good
that
ones
way.
out there. I haven't experimented with them yet. Maybe next time I will. But I found out the hard way that when I thought I had things in order, I had enough down on paper, per se, to come up with a novel and a good story.
When you
And I
say
didn't.
had it down, you mean you had it divided into chapters even?
Had divided into chapters
Okay.
and events and things like that, but it was all over the place. And so I hired, well, when I got selected to partner with my
Writing partner?
my company that I published with,
Oh, okay, okay,
they said, yeah, we'd like you to go through a developmental edit.
okay.
I said, okay, what's that? They said, well, here's some names, contact them, and basically instead of just doing a line edit, you really need to develop the plot and for what happens first, the where you go with it and how it finishes kind of thing. And I said, yeah, I kind of got that, but I see what you're saying. I need some work on that. I hired an editor, a professional editor who does that full time. She was wonderful. Now she lives out in Tennessee, so we had to work over Google Docs and pass some things around, and it took a little time and things like that. But boy, I learned a lot from her. And she was very good at describing, how to set the exposition, how to dramatize the setting, how to immerse your reader into this society 1,000 years from now, what it's like, so they know, like they're sitting there in it, looking around.
Right.
How to be descriptive in the characters, how they think and feel and move and things like that. Introduce the antagonist and the protagonist and things like that, key characters, things that will spawn off later on. Those were things, as a first-time author, I struggled with because I hadn't been through it before. Now if I have to go through it again, well, I have a little bit more experience to help me out with that process. And I think what I would do this time is sort of think bigger picture first, bulletize some things first, kind of think about where I want to start out, some of the events I'd like to have play out, and where I want to end up with things. And then start digging in a little bit deeper into those. You see, the first time around, I kind of did it in the reverse. I knew what certain things I wanted to play out. I'd come home from work and say, I got to get this idea out of my head and into the computer. And I'd do that. But I didn't really know where it was going to be in the final grand scheme of things.
Yeah, there are a lot of writers that write that way. I can think of a few that are actually New York Times bestselling authors and won awards. And then there are people who outline the whole entire story, chapter, all the way through, and then they start writing. And there's one particular author that I love. She will outline, and then she may write chapter 1 today, and then she'll skip to chapter 5 because she's feeling chapter 5.
Right.
And she'll just skip around until she finishes the whole thing. So I'm like, is that a hybrid? Because she's not writing from cradle to grave, from start to finish. She's just kind of bouncing, kind of like a pantster, but not really, because there's organization and structure to the writing.
That's the key. There's organization and structure, and I didn't really have that when I was bouncing around. I didn't have that one outline that kind of guided me through the whole thing from 1,000 feet up. I was kind of missing that. I kind of had it in my head a little bit, but I didn't really start out writing that way. I started out writing, in this book that I'm working on that I want to write, I have a great idea, and I'm going to write a chapter on it right now so I don't forget, and I'm going to make it really, really good. Problem is, later on, when I had a manuscript coming to fruition, it needed to be reworked and things needed to be moved around in time a little bit. That's all fine and good, except when you move things around after they're already written complete chapters.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you got to really watch. You can mess a lot of things up.
You can, especially if
Yeah.
you start tweaking chapter 7, but there's something in chapter 3 that
Yeah.
could impact chapter 7, and you got to go back, and then you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm rewriting this whole thing, and then you start adding other chapters because you got to add. You have this character, you want to develop him a little bit more, so you add a chapter that really focuses on him. But
Yeah.
how does that over the whole story?
Yeah.
Impact
Yep.
that insertion and that much information, and
Yep.
how does it all tie together?
Yep.
But we love it as writers, don't we? You know, I mean, it's like, you know, people may think, oh, it's such a undertaking, but it's such a great, fun, rejuvenating, inspiring, amazing undertaking, and so we do it, and we love it. And then we finish. So let's talk about the finish. So you finish the book, and then what? Did you go directly into the business of writing? Because the creative process is done now. So what was your next step?
Well, that's another thing. I was never really a social media bug. You have to become one.
Social media, yeah.
You have to become one if you're going to be an author and you're trying to entrepreneur your book and become, successful with it. So that's number one. You got to get out there. You have to be public facing. Before you get there, of course, you have to decide, well, how are you going to publish?
Yeah.
How are you going to get this great piece of work that you have on your computer out there so everyone else can see and enjoy it?
So what options did you look at?
3 basic options before me were the traditional publishing company houses, the hybrid houses, which are very much like the traditional houses. And most of the time, most of your authors, especially first-time authors, are thinking, yeah, I'd like to get with some of the traditional houses. They're the biggest ones. They've been around the longest. They can get my book the most widespread and most visibility and things like that. Problem is you can't just go and talk to them as a first-time no-name author. Now, if you're Tom Clancy or J.K. Rowling or something like that, maybe they'll pick up the phone and talk with you. Other than that, you have to have a literary agent. So that's part of the process too.
Was that part of your process?
It was.
Okay.
In fact, for me, I spent quite a while pitching or querying to literary agents. And that involves sitting down and trying to find them. Google becomes your friend.
Yeah.
You find the agents and the agencies, and you try to read over the bios of the agents that are there and try to decide, well, who can you show your work to, and what they call pitch or query them.
Right, and especially focusing on the ones that are looking for work that is in the genre that you write in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's critical because they may be looking for romance novels, and that's all they deal with.
And that's not what you have.
That's not what I have, so I would have to bypass them and go to the next person. This takes time, takes hours, as you know. Takes time. And this was, again, something I'm doing in my evenings and my weekends as best I could. 127 times, Helena.
Okay. James Patterson was 200 and something. I remember rejection letters.
Yeah.
I know it was 2 something.
Yes.
I just don't remember the exact number, but yeah, that was inspiring when I heard that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And actually, about half the time you get nothing back. Because they're folks like you and I, they only have so many hours in a week.
Right.
They already have their client list.
Yeah.
They call their list, and they're looking for one specific thing extra to put on it. And if you're not on target exactly, you just go into the slush pile with everyone else, and it's no thank you.
Yeah, those first few pages are critical.
Yeah. And you have to give them what they want, exactly what they want, or they'll throw you in the trash as well.
Coming out the gate.
So 127 times I pitched and queried and got, no thank you, but have a nice day. And it turns out, remember I mentioned the social networking piece?
Yes.
It turns out on my social network, I befriended someone who was somewhat influential in the Philadelphia area, a writer, an entrepreneur, a producer. And he knew someone who was very influential in the writing business, the publishing business. So because I knew someone who knew someone, I got into a conversation online about publishing fiction. And the person that I needed to get to mentioned to me, hey, why don't you pitch your query to my fiction recruiter. And so I did. Well, one thing led to another, and they had you have to go before a board and be voted in or out. And I was voted in, and lo and behold, my 128th query was successful for me in partnering with a New York-based hybrid publishing company. But as you know, that is a long process.
Yeah. How long did it take from the time that you finished to the time that you were actually signed?
About a year and a half. About a year and a half. And it takes 2 to 3 hours on average probably for one query, one pitch. By the time you find them online, by the time you read about them online and go to the website and learn about them, by the time you decide who it is that you might resonate with, and you put together everything that they want and are asking for, and you send it off, it's a good 2 or 3 hours per query. And like I said, I queried 127 times with a thank you for contacting me, but it doesn't fit my list. Wish you the best of luck.
Right.
And that's about all you get back.
Right. So with the publisher that signed you, from the time that they gave the nod to the time that it hit the stands, what was that time frame?
They will tell you anywhere from 9 to 18 months, depending. If you're,
and that's normal, dream catchers.
Yeah. If your manuscript is in great shape and it doesn't need a ton of work, you're more in the 9-month range. If you need a rewrite in the sense of a developmental edit, it's going to take an extra 4 to 5 months or whatever added to that 9 months. But the thing is, and you know, behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes in to getting a book to look the way it does when it's sitting on the shelf.
And people think, oh gosh, I'm going to sign with Simon & Schuster, Random House, and you know, I'm set. I don't have to do anything but just, you know, this glamorous life of getting out of the limo and walking into your book signing. Dream catchers, that ain't how it works.
No.
That's not. I know so many authors who are very, very well into their careers. They're doing it full time. They're signed with big houses, and their people, not the publishers' people, but their people are the ones that are scheduling, you know, the book tours, where they're going to be, you know, what. Now, of course, having that brand behind you helps. 1,000%. And they do have, you know, they do have some equities and weigh into all of that. But many times it's the authors and the writers that are also very, very much involved in that process. And the social media, dream catchers, you're doing your own social media, whether you're with the traditional or with the hybrid or on demand, that kind of stuff. But you want to, because you want to control the narrative that has to do with you as a writer, your persona. Because many times people follow the name. They're going to follow you as an author, and then secondly, your book. Especially if your book is, you know, just drops and it is just a mind-blowing bestseller. So now it's like, okay, well, anything that Troy puts out there, Troy, because he's the writer, he's the one that did this phenomenal job on the first book, I'm going to buy it anyway. And then at that point, does it really matter who you're signed with?
Right.
Because now it's about you, the author, the success that you've put into your branding, and people picking up your book from the shelves because you put in all that work. So it's very, very important that you focus on there's the process, the creative process, but then the business side of it as well is so important.
Yes, very important point. Yes, thank you, and very well said. And it's like you said, the days where you sign with Simon & Schuster or Hachette or Macmillan or one of the big houses, and then you sit back and you watch things all play out for you. If they ever existed, I think we're well past that now. No matter who you're signed with, it's work. It's work and it's time and it's effort.
But for now, I want to thank you, and we will stay in touch because I want to be a witness to how wonderfully successful this book will continue to be, and for your upcoming projects. I
Well,
want to support them and have you back on the show.
Absolutely.
Dreamcatchers, thank you for joining us today, and keep watching because we have so much more to share with you this season. You can stream this show on any of our 9 streaming platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and the #1 network on the continent, which is the American Legacy Network. You can also find us on one of our 23 channels. And you can find all of that information on our website. And I'm also very excited to announce that The Haven will be globetrotting. That's right, we are taking this show on the road. Our show will be taped at some of your favorite destinations. And if you want to join us as a professional writer or as a dream catcher, again, go to our website at www.writershavenshow.com for more information. I want to see your faces in the places. You can also go to our website for information on where and how to tune into our broadcast. So that's all for now. And until next time, catch fire on purpose.